Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about why monster champions matter and why they are something that I really don't want to see disappear or fall by the wayside in Riot's future champion designs. Now, it's no secret at all that Riot haven't released many monster champions, and especially given that their recent labeling of Sett and Lilia as monster champions has led to a lot of players being very unhappy and a lot of players very concerned for the future of more monstrous champions inclusion in League of Legends, and I think this is even more apparent when you look at more recent champion designs. For example, for Viego, who, let's be real, is a very pretty boy. When he didn't have to be, Riot could have pushed that design a little bit more than they did, but they ended up making him very much so a sort of pop star, very pretty character, which just kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to a lot of players, I would say, and sort of looking at that design and saying, you know, well, if this is what Riot are going to be designing in the future, is there any home still for maybe not stereotypically attractive champions or even ugly champions, you know, flat out champions that don't look very pretty at all? Is there still a place for them in League of Legends? Now, to clarify real quick, when I talk about monster champions, I do usually mean clearly non-human champions. So things like Rammus, Skarner, Cho'Gath, Fiddlesticks, all of these count as monster champions. And I will even consider some champions like Rengar because they are very clearly non-human. They very clearly do have sort of a different aesthetic going on, a different style going on. And they're sort of hard for players to really see as human. I am not going to count champions such as Sett, who's just a furrier dude than normal. There's really nothing else that changes about him. Or Lilia. And I say Lily here because really Riot could have pushed that design a lot more to make her very obviously a more monstrous champion. They could have given her a deer nose, for example. They could have done a lot to change Lilia around and to make it so that she very obviously was a monster champion, and they really did kind of sand those details down and make it so that Lilia was as close to human as you can get for a centaur. And it's not like centaurs are that far away from humans in the first place. They are literally half human as it is. That's kind of how centaurs work. So in that kind of comparison, that's kind of what I'm getting at with in regards to Riot changing around, you know, what monster champions and sort of labeling, oh, well, Lily's a monster champion. Well, when you kind of look at it, it's a very sanded down monster champion design, especially when you consider something like Anivia, who was designed back in the day, who is a monster champion, but you kind of get the feeling that if she'd have been designed today, she would have been, if you're familiar with Star Fox, a Falco Lombardi type character where, yeah, okay, very clearly still birdie, but also with human proportions and, you know, very vaguely human features, that kind of a thing. I would not have been surprised at all to see Riot trying to, you know, create Anivia in that sort of a fashion. So now, monster champions like these tend to be niche, but they also tend to be very well beloved by the people who play them, which is why it's concerning that fewer monster champions get made because of the eventuality of a VGU. I don't think I need to talk to you guys about how these VGUs can very significantly change a character's visual appearance and sort of sand off a lot of the rough edges that the character may have had in the past. I think good examples of these are Galio, Yorick, and Trundle, who immediately spring to mind as champions who very much so were very pretty when they got reworked, but who were not very pretty at all. They were actually quite ugly back when they first came out, right? They were very much so champions that did not have a stereotypically attractive appearance, that did have a lot of different things about them that made them look and feel different from other champions. And once their rework came out, they ended up being a lot more of an attractive champion, a lot more of a champion that you look at and say, oh, okay, yeah, no, I totally want to play that guy. And to be fair to Riot, there is a reason to steer away from monster champions because they can be hard to relate to. It's really easy to put yourself in the shoes of any human character on the roster because, well, you are human. I would assume, at least. Don't tell me, you know, tell me if you're not in the comments, but I would assume everyone watching this video is a human being. So it's easy to put yourself into the shoes of a paladin like Garen or a berserker like Olaf because at the very least, you can kind of get how those champions work and you can kind of sort of do the things they do, right? Whereas it's a lot harder to do that if you are playing as an ever-evolving insectile aberration like Kha'Zix or an armadillo like Rammus. That's really kind of a harder champion to put yourself in the shoes of and to say, yeah, okay, I can relate to those champions. And this is also not a problem that is exclusively limited to Riot Games. Even Magic the Gathering, actually, head designer Mark Rosewater on his blog has all the time been asked, why aren't there more non-human planeswalkers? And essentially his answer is because they're hard to relate to. Turns out there aren't a lot of dragons or sphinxes that play this game. There are a lot of humans that play this game, and that's why we do mostly human planeswalkers, and that's sort of a similar thing. And in that regard, Riot has actually tried in the past to really limit this. They specifically designed their older monster champions with quality voiceovers in mind to play up their relatability, and that they weren't just mindless monsters. Kha'Zix is actually specifically referenced in a lot of the early threads Riot made about Kha'Zix, where they're kind of saying, you know, we specifically tried to make it so that players understand that this is a very intelligent creature, that he's not just a monster, which is partially why I wasn't a fan when Rek'Sai came out and was just straight a monster, but that's beyond the scope of this video. But so either way, with all of this being said, I do still think monster champions have a very important place in League of Legends, and the reason for this is twofold. First and foremost, I think that monster champions lead to better kit designs. So while yes, Riot could obviously design a humanoid character to replace every single monster champion in the game without changing their kit. They could do this. I'm going to completely put that out there in the world. They could say, we are going to replace Galio with a dude. We're going to replace Rengar with a dude. We're going to replace Kha'Zix with a dude. After all, Victor exists, and Victor has that same sort of evolution mechanic, right? There are ways that Riot can certainly do it, especially in a fantasy IP, where they can have a human character take the place of every single monster character in the game. However, this is a bad idea for a couple reasons. First, it's necessarily restrictive. It's a lot harder to think of a kit like Cho'Gath's or like Fiddlesticks's if you're thinking human, because humans don't normally do the thing those champions do, right? Those champions are very unique in the fact that you kind of say, okay, cool, we're going to do this big Voidborn kaiju type character, so what is this character going to be like? What is that character's skill set going to look like? And Riot have the then creativity to say, okay, you know, here's what this character's design could look like, here's what this character could actually do in game, and that leads to more interesting and more flavorful character designs from that point on. And even on Monster Champions, where you could do everything the Monster Champion does with a human, I think the best example of this would be something like Rengar versus Rengar's dad. You obviously could do Rengar's dad, who is a legendary hunter, with Rengar's kit. It would be super easy to do. It makes total sense. But you would lose a lot of the thematic wins that Rengar has by being a Lion Man, because the stalking a champion in stealth, the leaping at them from brush, the shanking them to death, that sort of a thing, that all gets played up so much better when you're in the headspace of, I am a lion, I am stalking my prey. That's a really, really cool thematic win. And in a similar fashion as well, Kha'Zix. Very obviously a love letter to Xenomorphs from the Alien franchise, and you sort of get that from his character design. You get that from what he's able to do in-game as the sort of ever-evolving bug that leaps at you from the shadows, and every time the enemy team sees you, you're doing something different. That's something that you could do on a human or humanoid character, but it would not have the same amount of thematic coherency or the same amount of thematic flavorfulness that these champions do by being monster champions. And obviously, you know, you have monster champions that do things that other champions would never be able to do. Fiddlesticks's kit could not have existed without his existence as a scary living scarecrow, but also not really a scarecrow and never was in the first place kind of deal. That's something super unique, and while you could have still done mechanically the same kit, it wouldn't have had nearly as much of a theme to it. Second, monster champions have very unique world building, a very unique effect on the world building of Runeterra, which is starting to be more of an IP, so this is a relevant point. And they have they bring a lot more unique experiences to the game, which I kind of already talked about a little bit on my previous point, because they have different kits, because they have different playstyles, and they sort of have a different thematic on top of that, right? When you're playing Kha'Zix, you have the theme of, I want to be the alien from the Alien franchise, right? I want to be running around stalking the shadows and pouncing on isolated champions and ripping them apart. If you're going to be playing someone like Rammus, you want to be the theme of, I'm going to stack armor and watch as my enemies kill themselves by hitting me. That's a really kind of cool thematic thing that you can do with these sorts of champions. And it leads to players feeling, you know, getting a really nice thematic experience out of it, as opposed to playing a human champion where, yeah, there's some thematicness to it, but partially the problem as well is that a lot of the human champions overlap in terms of their thematics, right? Garen and Darius are both very obviously knight-type champions. Caitlyn, Jhin, Varus, they're all snipers. They all kind of overlap in certain regards, so even though they have different styles of being a sniper or a knight or an assassin, they all still kind of overlap in that niche, so it doesn't necessarily feel like you're getting a tremendously unique experience by playing them, as opposed to playing more monstrous champions like Malphite versus Rammus, who, yeah, they're both armor-stacking tanks, but one is throwing a mountain at someone, and one is that, you know, stop hitting yourself type champion that I really do like. The other thing that these monsters do is that they all build out the world and what we know about Runeterra, and they sort of help develop the universe in someone's mind. It's interesting for a player to be able to sort of look at what kind of characters exist in game and what kind of things Runeterra has to offer, and then be able to say, okay, cool, I kind of get a sense for what this world is like when you have these sort of otherworldly void abominations next to Petrosite statues, next to whatever Rammus is, right? That sort of helps develop the world in everyone's mind, which makes for a stronger IP. And is part of the reason I think Legends of Runeterra has done so well, because it has so much to pull from in the terms of monster champions we've seen, in the terms of things that Riot have been able to do that exist in the game. So generally, that's kind of why I'm saying that monster champions are very important for Riot to continue to design. They're very important to maintain in the game, and especially they're very important to try to maintain wherever you can. It would be very easy for Riot to change a champion like Shyvana or Nocturne or Skarner to be more relatable and to be more kind of sanded down like I was talking about, but I don't think they should do that, because I think those champions still bring a lot of interesting things to the table that really would be lost if Riot did choose to make them a little bit more of the relatable e-boy or e-girl style that they've been doing with champions like Viego. But those are just my thoughts. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think of any of this down in the comment section below, especially if you're a Monster Champion fan. Let me know what you're thinking of that down in the comments. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.